Thank you for joining me on With Just 15 Defeats, the premier boxing show here on YouTube. My name is Teekosey, and today I'm going to be discussing the biggest fight of the year. That's right, Conor McGregor making his debut in professional boxing against the legendary Floyd Mayweather Jr. In doing so, I'm going to be firing through more than 20 different factors that I believe have a bearing on this matchup and its potential outcome. If you want to discuss this fight, I would be pleased to hear from you. Hit me up in the comments section and let's get this one started. And remember, for more videos on the world of boxing, hit the subscribe button. In particular, we've got the heavyweight rankings at the moment, and I would love to hear from all the fans on my heavyweight rankings for the summer of 2017. So as I say, I've got about 20 different factors, so let's move across. But before we start talking about this fight, I just want to tell you a little bit about my history with MMA to show that I'm not a Johnny-come-lately. I've been avidly watching mixed martial arts since about 2006, so about 11 years. And as I say, I've been watching it avidly. And as you can expect, as this is a boxing channel, I am a boxing nut, but I also avidly follow numerous other sports, including MMA, including football, soccer, how many people might call it, and also bizarrely tennis. No relevance there. But as I say, I've been watching MMA and the UFC since about 2006. I can remember searching for some boxing fights on the internet when searching for things wasn't as amazing as it is now. And I came across some UFC fights, some UFC cards, and I can remember watching one of the cards. It was somewhere around late UFC 60 maybe, and I can remember it had Sean Shirk in it, Diaz and Ortiz, and I watched that card and I remember thinking, wow, this is something that I haven't seen before, and it's something that really interests me. And you know, we all had these thoughts when we were younger. Who would win in a fight? This guy against that guy, different disciplines. So it was great to see that something was coming together, something was beginning. And I know the UFC had its foundations had started a decade before, but I believe that around about the time that I started watching it, that's when it started to really evolve as a genuine sport. And since then, I've read the book by Art Davie, one of the founders of the UFC. It's a book called Is This Legal? Phenomenal read. I mean, I really enjoyed that. It goes through and charts how the inception of the UFC came about, how it was born in his mind, and how it came to fruition along with the Gracies. It's funny, I know very few people that actually, not just that they don't like MMA, they have never really seen it, never really given it the time of day. And in the past, I've had discussions with people about MMA, what it is. And most people have like an ignorant view where they just think it's brutal fighting, when clearly it isn't. It's a very skillful art form that has a number of disciplines in it. And I have friends for years that have told me that the boxers are elite sportsmen. They'll always be MMA fighters. And I've always tried to say that it's not as simple as that. It's not as black and white as that. You can't really put them in together and say this guy would beat this guy, because in my mind the sports are so different. And the way that I explain this is by saying, if you had a soccer team and a rugby team, there's a lot of similarities there, but if the best played the best in the different sports, whatever sport you were playing, they would win out. If a badminton player played a tennis player, if Mo Farah raced against Usain Bolt, who would win? They have different disciplines. And the only reason why a debate between MMA and boxing can occur, in my humble opinion, is that there is the knockout. It isn't they punch, they both punch. It isn't they fight. It isn't that there's a referee. It isn't that they get judged. It's that the fight can end with a knockout. And it really is as simple as that. And in the past, we've seen boxers compete in MMA, and it's always been, in my opinion, completely pointless because of the amount of skills you need to be a credible MMA competitor. Simply having an ability to box isn't enough. In the very first or second UFC, there was a boxer and he came into it with one hand in a glove and one hand free. So presumably he could hold someone and punch them. It's ridiculous when you look back. Furthermore, we saw James Toney fought Randy Couture just about 5 or 6 years ago, and he completely embarrassed himself because he had no MMA ground fighting ability, and within a few seconds Couture took him down and smashed the hell out of him. And this is the thing, typically you'd say the best of that sport, if you're competing in it, will win. And talk about people like Amir Khan and Tyson Fury wanting to fight against MMA fighters under MMA rules, they would never have a chance. And if this Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor was MMA rules, this would be a comprehensive beatdown victory for Conor McGregor. No doubt about it. But it isn't, and that's why we have the intrigue and the possibility. So why has this fight occurred? This fight has occurred for one reason and one reason only, and that is the phenomenal amount of cash that will be available to these two guys, and the fact that it's something that Floyd Money Mayweather Jr. cannot resist. The lure to make the incredible money, the record-breaking money. And Floyd Mayweather Jr. as a boxer against another boxer, I don't believe could make as much money as he could make in this fight. A rematch with Pacquiao, would it have that interest? Even fighting against some of the interesting boxers at the time, like Terence Crawford or Keith Thurman, it would not generate the pay-per-view money that this fight against Conor McGregor will. And it's likewise for Conor McGregor. There's no way him or the UFC could generate the amount of money that this fight's going to make on their own back. Now, boxing's clearly the much bigger sport, but UFC are doing so much right. They're producing an entertaining product. The music, the entrances, the discussions, the intros, the trash talking, it's all there. And when you combine that with the high level of action that you get in the fights, and the fact that the fights are a lot shorter, meaning that they can cram a lot more into a card, it has a very exciting feel to it. The boxing, when you have a lot of 12 rounders, just doesn't have. So is this good for boxing? Is this good for MMA? Firstly, is this good for MMA? 100% win or lose. This is putting MMA on the map. I mean, it will be discussed more mainstream, whatever. Now, here in the UK, we do not hear much about MMA in the mainstream. The mainstream news do not report about MMA. But I'm sure this fight will be covered on the major news networks. So it brings MMA, it brings UFC to another platform. Now, is it good for boxing? In a nutshell, I would say no. And mainly because if Mayweather wins, everyone will say, well, this was what was to be expected. It was a stupid exhibition, blah, blah, blah. These two guys made millions of money out of everyone and put on a bad show. It was a completely pointless exercise. But if Conor McGregor wins, holy shit. Suddenly, boxing's in a bad place, in my opinion. The biggest star of the last 30 years has been defeated by effectively a novice. And that can only harm the shows moving forward, the reputation of the game. And if you forget about the money for 1 second that both of these guys are going to make, okay, Floyd Mayweather Jr. has everything to lose and McGregor has nothing. Because if Mayweather loses, he suddenly gets that 1. He loses the O. He's 49-0. He's almost a myth, a boxing legend. He's fought the best of the best and defeated them, sometimes comprehensively. And to get that 1 on the record, it would completely ruin his legacy. Whereas if McGregor loses, so what? He moves back to UFC and MMA. He's still got these championship belts. He goes on to defend them. He goes on to fight at another weight class. He does all these different things. It's not a problem for him. And McGregor moves forward having beaten one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time. So we're going to move forward and we're going to discuss a variety of things with this fight. And at the end, I'm going to tell you my number 1 deciding factor of how that's going to affect this fight. So what can we expect from this huge fight? We can expect trash talking. It sells. I love trash talking myself. It adds the whole spectacle. I think it's generally boring when the guys have nothing to say. Well, we saw with Anthony Joshua and Wladimir Klitschko. Now, they were respectful to each other. But sometimes you get guys that just have nothing. It's almost like, oh, this is just a job. Just a job. I'm just going to go and do my thing and that's that. I mean, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear that you hate this guy and you want to beat him. There's a reason why. Do you know? I want a story. And the thing is, we know this sells. And this is why it's always surprised me, particularly here in the UK, that they don't market cards with more animosity. We've seen like the way that David Haye has conducted himself over the years, how big those fights became that he's been involved in. Tony Bellew, we saw that even with Dillian Whyte and Anthony Joshua. We've seen over the years with Floyd Mayweather, he sells the fights regardless. And the beauty of this is that Conor McGregor is a master talker. He can trash talk with the best of anyone. I mean, you watch the clips, you see his interviews, he's very, very entertaining. And I'm sure once this gets cooking, it's going to be entertaining. And in my opinion, I mean, I think that Conor McGregor has talked his way up the levels in UFC. I mean, you look at some of the fights he's had at the time, and he never. I still, when I look back, I think, how did he get that title shot against Jose Aldo? He like looking back, yeah, he fought some decent guys, but at the time, were they decent at that time? So here we go. Here's a big question. It was a big statement. This is a boxing match. It will be competed under boxing rules with a boxing ref, boxing gloves. Okay? And Floyd Mayweather, over the last 20 years, has beaten the best of the best at boxing. So can Conor McGregor, as a novice boxer, how can he beat a master when the greats have been unable to beat him? And you look at what Floyd Mayweather has, what he's achieved, the experience of the guy, an Olympian, a professional since 1996, a world champion since 1998. So he's been a world champion for close to 20 years. And when he won that first world title, Conor McGregor was 10 years old. Wow. And we're talking about one of the very most experienced boxers of his time. We're talking about a guy that fought Manny Pacquiao, Madonna twice, Saul Canelo Alvarez, who will continue to go on to be a great, Miguel Cotto, Mosley, Hatton, De La Hoya, Juan Manuel Marquez, Zab Judah, Gatti. I mean, he's fought some all-time greats and Hall of Famers like pretty much nobody else. However, there is going to be a differential in this matchup, and it's going to be size. Now, I believe that Conor McGregor, when the fight takes place, will be significantly bigger than Floyd Mayweather Jr. Now, on paper, McGregor's only slightly taller, 1 inch taller, and has a 2-inch reach advantage. However, we know that Floyd Mayweather Jr. has competed for most of his career at lower weight classes, with about 12 years ago moving into the light welterweight arena, and only competing in the 154-pound class twice and never really filling out for it. Whereas Conor McGregor in the MMA weight classes has been competing for the last couple of years at about the 155, and he even jumped up to the 170 weight class. So I believe on the day he's going to be a much bigger guy, a much bigger guy. Now, talking about the actual fight, realistically, there's a few factors. One of the factors that we can consider is the Manny Pacquiao fight. He's probably the most dynamic opponent that Mayweather's fought. He's also a southpaw, but ultimately Floyd Mayweather Jr. dealt with him fairly easy. He reduced Pacquiao to a limited offence, and realistically it was a decent win for Mayweather. And as that is the closest, realistically Mayweather will never have fought a fighter that is replicable to Conor McGregor, and that's a little bit of an issue. For Mayweather. We also need to consider the fact that Mayweather lacks power. He lacks concussive power. Yes, he's knocked out a lot of people, but you have to think that he has fought a lot of guys, 49-0, and he's only got about a 50% knockout ratio, which is quite poor. And when he's moved up to the elite fighters, that percentage is almost non-existent. He's gone the distance with the majority of elite opponents. You look at the fight against Marquez, which I think is an absolute masterclass. I can remember watching it at the time and thinking, this is Marquez. He's an absolute legend. He's a top-class opponent, and he can hardly lay a glove on Floyd Mayweather Jr. Hardly lay a glove. Now, he threw punches, he landed them, but they were not solid punches. And I can remember thinking he hardly touched him. Mayweather hardly absorbed a punch. And this is against an absolutely rock solid, top quality opponent. Now let's talk about Conor McGregor's confidence, another serious factor in this fight. Now, he has confidence and arrogance like we've never seen before. We've seen confident guys, we've seen arrogant guys, but Conor McGregor is oozing this confidence and arrogance and swagger like no one we've seen before. And this was particularly evident in his last fight against Eddie Alvarez. He beat him before the first bell was rung. And this has led to a completely different style kind of evolving for Conor McGregor, in my opinion. I believe that as he came up through the rise to stardom, he was a fairly counter-striking MMA fighter. He was looking for those openings, and he was landing them with very fast hands that came from quite far out, and he was mixing them up with combinations, with kicks and punches at the same time at phenomenal speed. As he's risen up in the fame game, he's become more arrogant, more cocky, more sure of himself, and he's gone on the offense himself, and he's really frightened opponents and basically scared them into submission. So thinking about that, if he was to go on the offense against Floyd Mayweather, is he falling into the perfect game plan for Floyd Mayweather? We've seen Floyd Mayweather, he's the defensive genius. He is called the defensive genius, and he's called that for a reason. He allows his opponent to be drawn in and then he doesn't let the opponent hit him, and then with his own quick, slick hands, he's landing combinations, he's scoring points, he's moving away. So it would be interesting to see whether if Conor McGregor falls back into a more counter-striking style himself, could he lure in Floyd Mayweather? Is Floyd Mayweather too clever for that? Will Conor McGregor be forced to try and give the fans something that they've paid for and really attack with excitement and basically fall into those traps? We won't know, because we don't know what Conor McGregor is going to be like as a boxer. So what we do know is that in the past, in the boxing game, Floyd Mayweather has been protected by a number of referees. They haven't allowed opponents to hold and fight on the inside. They've given him that breathing space. They've allowed him to get away from the offense of his opponents. How does that factor into this fight? Now, for my opinion, I don't think that Conor McGregor is going to be trying to get on the inside, hold him and rough him up. If we have to look at his MMA ability and discuss on that, because that's all we've got to go by. As I say, he's a counter-striking. He's very straight, upright. I think he's going to be looking for the openings to land quick, devastatingly accurate shots. He's not going to want to try and get in tough. So referee, I don't think, plays a major role in this fight. Now, as I say, the different stances are going to be interesting, and it's going to be interesting to see like where they position themselves in the ring. Now, we know that in MMA, fighters usually are positioned with more distance between them than on traditional boxers, and that's because there is the threat of the takedown and the threat of kicks, and because fighters like to set up attacks with kicks, there is that little extra distance. And Conor McGregor has a very upright posture. His head is very, very straight and back, and he's trying to keep out of distance. So it'll be interesting to see whether he changes for boxing, whether he tries to adopt that, and how that affects the fact that Floyd is most likely to be on the defensive. So two things that Conor McGregor has in his favour. Firstly, we've got speed. Okay, we've got speed of movement around the ring, and we've also got speed of punches to hand speed. He's got phenomenal hand speed combinations, as well as his ability to come in and out, close the distance. So it'll be interesting to see whether this does replicate itself in the boxing against someone like Floyd Mayweather. So the next thing is knockout power. Something that Floyd Mayweather doesn't have, McGregor has in abundance. He has phenomenal knockout power, but will it translate itself with the bigger boxing gloves? Who knows? We've seen Conor McGregor knock out a number of opponents. However, there is a very huge difference between knockouts in UFC and knockouts in boxing. And the difference is this: the majority of knockouts or stoppages that come in MMA are following a knockdown, and the MMA fighter will jump on the opponent and try and land loads and loads of shots, and the referee will call it a day. In boxing, you don't get that. If you stun your opponent, if you drop them, they're given the opportunity to recover, or the referee calls it a day then. So we have to see how that element of the game will translate itself in this fight. So when we talk about the distance of the fight, if it's going the distance, most people would assume that this will suit Mayweather. Mayweather's gone the distance in 50% of his fights against, as I said earlier, Hall of Fame opposition. Whereas we saw recently Conor McGregor fought Diaz, and it went into the next round. He wasn't able to close the show. He struggled, he tired, and he completely gassed out. I'm not saying that's going to happen because it's a completely different situation, completely different type of fight. But you would assume that Mayweather is going to have the advantage if this goes the distance, and if Mayweather can regularly land shots and avoid shots from Conor McGregor. So let's move into the final few factors. I've read over and over again, many of the Conor McGregor fans who are gaining confidence from the fact that Floyd Mayweather Jr. has had problems with southpaws, and they're gaining confidence from the times where Mayweather has taken a shot and he's been stunned. Now, the first thing to say is that Floyd Mayweather Jr. is undefeated. Yeah, he had some struggles throughout his fights, but he still overcame them. He found the solution and he won. There's lots of talk about southpaws being an issue, but he beat every southpaw he's fought, and most of them he beat comprehensively. Even if they gave him a little bit of an issue early on, some of those fights he had struggled in the first 2 or 3 rounds and then went on to comprehensively beat them. He didn't have any problems against Manny Pacquiao. And for my opinion, this has only been brought to the fore, and mainly because Floyd Mayweather Jr. doesn't knock anyone out. If he was knocking some people out every now and again, I think this would be, it wouldn't even be brought up. It's the fact that he's gone the distance with most of these guys. We're saying he's got an issue with southpaw. There's talk about him not wanting to fight them, but most orthodox fighters don't want to fight southpaws because it's out of the ordinary. There's obviously significantly more orthodox fighters out there. So when you fight a southpaw, it's unusual. It's possibly not what you've been training for. It's a lot more easier to fight against orthodox, and it's what you know, because that's, you know, it's how you know how to fight. So here we go. This is just an amusing thing, amusing statement. Will Conor McGregor get disqualified? I mean, there's odds of Conor McGregor throwing a kick. Now, he's probably, I don't know the ins and outs of the contract. Whatever happens, he's going to make multi-millions out of this. And if he just decides to do a spinning heel kick or something, or some sort of kick and stop the fight, will it make much difference to him? He'll go back to the UFC. There'll be controversy, but that'll be it. Like, is there a real possibility that he'll do something? Is there a possibility that if he isn't winning, he just thinks, sod it, and he just kicks him to the head or something? Is that a real possibility? I'd like to think not. I'd like to see that we're going to get a genuine boxing exhibition here, but it's a possibility. So as I said right at the beginning of this video, or about 10 minutes in, my number one factor about this fight, my number one factor that could decide this fight is the age. It's the age. Floyd Mayweather Jr. is going to be 40 years of age when this fight takes place. He'll have had a 2-year absence from the sport, having retired, even going on a kind of retirement world tour. And he's now come back to the sport. That's an issue for me. It's not the same a decade or so ago when he said, oh, I'm retiring, and then 2 years later he came back, and was it the Marquez fight, and he absolutely schooled him. It's completely different to something like that. We're talking about a 40-year-old guy. It doesn't matter how legendary, how amazing he's been. He's had a 2-year absence. Will he be the same guy that even fought against Manny Pacquiao? I mean, it gets to a point where the body will deteriorate more quickly. Now, I can only assume that he's only doing this because he's taking Conor McGregor lightly. He doesn't see him as a genuine threat. He's not a boxer, okay? Now, I don't believe that Mayweather would come back for a rematch with Canelo, a fight with Keith Thurman, Terence Crawford. I don't think he'd be coming back for these fights. I just can't see it. But he sees that this super duper amazing amount of money's on the line against someone he probably thinks I should be able to handle more easily than anyone else I've ever fought. And looking at what the pundits say, you look at all the boxing pundits, all the current boxers, all the boxing pundits, they all say one thing: Floyd Mayweather wins this easily, or something similar to that. They all say this is going to be a comprehensive win. It's a complete mismatch. Whereas the UFC guys are saying they're more conservative, they're more cautious. And they're saying, do you know what? If Conor McGregor lands a shot, if he lands a shot, he can hurt Floyd Mayweather. And I think that there's some truth there. He can hurt him, but you'd think that Mayweather will be able to take him out. Now, as I said at the start of this video, I made a video about this fight 1 year ago, when it was people were starting to talk about it, and I spoke about 5 issues about the fight, what rules it would take place, and the amount of money, and blah blah blah. Just a few things really. But at the end of that video, I gave you my prediction for that fight. And what I said was that I think it will go one of 2 ways. I said that I think that the fight will stink the place out. I said I think it will be a poor fight. And it'll be a poor fight for one of 2 reasons. Floyd Mayweather wins a comprehensive decision victory, or he knocks Conor McGregor out. Now, do I, a year on, as the fight approaches, do I have the same opinion? The answer is almost. And the reason why it's almost is my number 1 factor of this fight, the age. Is Floyd Mayweather coming back to this fight in prime condition? Has he deteriorated rapidly? Is he still the same guy? Or has he slipped? Will he make mistakes? Are those legendary defensive abilities still there? Is he taking Conor McGregor lightly? Is it all about the money? Is it all about a payday? I think if he is a good-ish version of Floyd Mayweather, then he wins this fight fairly easily. And that is Conor McGregor making his debut against Floyd Mayweather Jr., who is 49-0 as an all-time great Hall of Famer boxer. I hope that you've enjoyed this video where I've discussed in great detail the factors surrounding this fight. If you have, hit me up with a comment, hit the like button. Remember to hit me up to subscribe to my channel and watch some of my other videos. I really do appreciate it. I've been Teekosey, and this has been With Just 15 Defeats.